Hello and welcome back to the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. Super stoked to have you guys here today. We have a return guest, Mr. Shawn Livingston.
Let's go. We're back.
Excited for this one because the first conversation we had, we were very high level with, kind of your story. We talked a little bit about the documentary. We talked a little bit about recovery, what life looks like now. I think what is really compelling and interesting and exciting about today's conversation is we get to deep dive some of the things that we kind of had to leave to the side last time.
Mm-hmm.
And after continuing to get to know you and hearing more of your story, I feel like so many people can relate to the depths of your story, not just the high level view. And so a question I get a lot, and I wanted to ask you the same question just to kick us right off, man. Day to day in addiction. So there's a lot to talk about there, but really, can you take me through, like, in your depths, like at the lowest point of your addiction, from wake up until bedtime, kind of what that looked like?
Ooh. Yeah. Misery, first off. Just the most, there's never a moment of fulfillment, never a moment of everything's okay. It's just, it's anxiety from the moment you open your eyes. Usually you're waking up and you're already sick. You know what I mean? So I don't know how graphic we want to get, but dry heaving, about to shit yourself, all that. But there's nothing worse than being dope sick and then trying to actually get a needle in your body. You're dehydrated. You can't find a vein. You're sitting there making yourself bleed over and over. And this is as we roll out of bed. And so then it's just the endless hustle to get high. The endless hustle of who am I going to manipulate? How am I going to get my means to get what I need today? And so I remember having a conversation with somebody not long ago, and they were talking about, I think we were talking about hip hop, and he was talking about hustlers, and he was talking about all these dudes sell drugs, they're hustlers and this and that. I was like, bro, you want to see a hustler? Go find an addict, go find a junkie. You can call a drug dealer a hustler. He sells a product that sells itself, but you want to make something out of nothing every day? There's a fucking hustler. And so it's just, bro, are we stealing money? Are we borrowing money? Are we playing middleman today? Are we bringing shit to the pawn shop? You know what I mean? Me personally, I never got down with the stealing thing. I never shoplifted. I wasn't ever a big thief. I just always felt like it was bad karma. So I didn't do that. That kept me out of some trouble. But I mean, it's just endless, dude. Endless phone calls, endless waiting for people to pick up the phone, trying to help other people manipulate other situations so they could get money, so they got to go through you to get the dope, and then you can get some off the top. It's just, it's an endless, it's the definition of insanity, dude, every day.
Questions around that. So the drug of choice, I believe that changes how you approach the night before and the day of your use.
For sure.
So like for me, with alcohol and cocaine, I didn't stop until the bag was gone.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's a different drug, like heroin, for example, was there ever a conversation the night before of like, all right, let me set some shit to the side, so that way in the morning, like, I know I'm good for a little bit?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
You tell yourself that every night. If you're actually able to do it is another story. I think any drug addict has played the game where it's like, all right, I'm going to go here for the weekend. This is going to get me through. Or tomorrow morning, I'm just going to save this a little bit, and then 30 minutes later, I'm in the bathroom doing it. So usually for me, it would end up being a bunch of cottons in the morning. For those that aren't familiar with heroin addiction, once you load your heroin in the spoon, put water on it, you need a filter. It's usually the end of a Newport cigarette butt. Bite a little piece out of that, and that's your filter. And so you save those. They soak up the water and the rest of the dope, all that, and you save a couple of those, and you can put some water on in the morning and get a shot out of it, at least to get you well. And that's what a lot of people, I don't think, understand is, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, is heroin addiction in particular, it wasn't the hustle to get high every day. It was just the hustle to be well.
Mm.
I just needed a shot to get me back normal to where I can actually operate. There gets a point where there's not enough money in the world to actually get you high.
That leads me to my next question. A lot of what we see on TV and the internet around heroin, it shows people like they hit the shot and then it's like instant nod.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to a couple different people, like every high is not like that.
No.
And every high isn't like
first couple.
Yeah. And then after that, it's like maintenance almost.
Yeah, you get back to normal. And then you start looking for ways, then you start discovering, if I mix in Xanax, I can get that original feeling back where I can catch that nod. So then you start adding other drugs into the mix, and it's just, bro, it's an endless pursuit to get back to that first high. It's an endless pursuit to get more money. It's an endless pursuit to get more drugs. And you are just hyper fixated on this 24/7. You're an alcoholic and cocaine.
Yeah.
How does my day-to-day differ from yours?
So one thing I struggled with was I could never put the bag down. Like if I had the bag, I was going to finish the bag.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple occasions where I didn't.
You doing key bumps? You doing rails?
Both.
Right.
But depending on like the environment. I usually, like if I went out, it was like bumps in the bathroom or off the back of the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
Lines off the back of the toilet. But I wouldn't stay out very long. Like I wanted to get home in my own comfort zone to do it how I wanted to do it.
Right.
If there was one of my boys that was down to hang out and do that, like great. But if not, I'd just go solo.
Yeah.
So I think for me, there was a couple times though where I was like, all right, I'm going to like, it's a big weekend. I'm going to catch like 2-3 hours of sleep and then roll into tomorrow and hit it hard. The anxiety would be so high when I would wake up. If I didn't have alcohol to taper it, I'd flush the bag.
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't keep it. I'm like, nah, I'm going to get caught with this. This is bad. God's telling me to get rid of it. I'd freak out in my head. Which is another reason I didn't go smoking weed.
Dude, good for you for bringing God into mid addiction.
Yeah, well, I did. He was always there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did everything I could to
block that out.
To attempt to block that out just out of guilt.
Yeah, no, and I get that. I do, and there was times I certainly did. But for me, the relationship was like alcohol was codependent on Coke. Coke was codependent on alcohol. And we, as addicts, there's like a fine line, especially with the drinking being the gateway drug for a lot of us, where it's like 1 beer, I don't crave dope.
Right.
2 beers, I don't crave dope.
Right.
4 beers, I'm in my fun.
That's it. You said it.
And I would make deals with myself, bro. I'd be like, all right, if they don't answer in 32 minutes, I'm not going to do it today.
32.
Yeah. It'd be something random like that.
Yeah.
And it'd get to like minute 31 and I'd send like 8 straight back to back, like, please answer, please answer. Or I'd be hitting somebody else. So I think the conversation that doesn't get had around addiction a lot is how often people actually try to like create a scenario where they stop, like while they're in it.
Right.
Like we do that.
Yeah.
But we never do it because, it's like anything else. The temptation to do whatever it is greater than your resolve to quit at that time.
Yeah.
And so, but for me, it would look like, if it was get off work Friday. So I wasn't a heavy user during the week. Because my job, in order to make enough money to do what I needed to do, I had like this other life where I had a mortgage. I had a truck payment.
Right.
I had dreams and goals, right? It was all there. But Friday, get off work. And it was always like a lot of people from work would be like, hey, let's go get a few beers at wherever. And you'd be like, yeah, man, we can do that. I'd go pop in and get 3 or 4 deep. I'd usually drink 5 by the time they drank 1. Like I was always a quick drinker.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted that edge quick. And I'd leave, and I'd leave there. And I lived in Fort Lauderdale. This is during the peak of everything. I have some stories in Atlanta too, but Fort Lauderdale was a peak. I would leave wherever we were at.
Have we talked about this?
I don't think
Fort
so.
Lauderdale?
No.
Oh.
We have that connection though.
Yeah, I used to live there.
Yeah, me too. Oakland Park.
Okay. I lived right outside of Pompano.
Okay. Yeah. That's where my work office was at.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Pompano Beach. But I'd get off work in Pompano, or if we were working in Palm Beach, wherever we were at, and I'd head back towards Oakland Park. And I'd stop on the way home from drinking with the guys, a couple beers, and there was a gas station, like a corner store right by my house. And when you're in that mode, you become really good friends with convenience store owners. Like those are your boys.
Yep.
Because they see you at all times, at all different states. And so I was like, well, I need to develop a good relationship with them so they know that like, no matter how I show up.
When I come in here all cracked out at fucking.
Yeah. I mean, well,
yeah.
So like, and it's
That's
money in your
just
pocket.
Trip.
Yeah. So that was always the goal. But I'd stop there and I would get typically like, probably the last 5 years of my addiction, I was like, no liquor. Like, right. I was like, I can't drink liquor. It goes bad south.
Mm-hmm.
Fast. And so I'd stop and get a 24 pack of the Bud Light bottles. And I would go home, sit on my back porch, put music on, start drinking those. Usually after about 4 or 5 of those, it was like, all right, man, like I'm feeling pretty good. Let me go see the scene. I'd catch an Uber. It's $4 to get to the beach. go to Blondie's. It's a beach bar down there. Elbow Room, those places right there at Fort Lauderdale Beach. I'd pop into Blondie's. So my primary dope dealer was a street dude down there at the beach bars. Jamaican dude, like Rastaman.
Right.
And he would weave these baskets and like cup holders and all this different shit. And I would go to him, like I knew where he would be set up, and I'd be like, yo, bro, I'd hand him the cash. I'd be like, I'll be at Blondie's. He'd be like, all right, man. And he'd come back, he'd walk in the bar and hand me like a hand-woven cup. He'd be like, here you go, man. Thanks for your business. Walk out. But in the bottom of that cup was always my dope.
Right.
And so I would instantly I rush to the bathroom, right? That first hit's like, you're ready for it. Especially if your buzz is heavy.
Yeah.
You're ready to curb that. So I'd rush to the bathroom, take like 2-3 bumps, come back out, drink a little bit more, go back to the bathroom, see if there was anything to prospect that night. You know what I'm saying? Like people to connect with. And then usually a couple hours into that, I'd be like, all right, let's go to the Gentleman's Club. There's a place called, it was solid gold and pure platinum. And I'd pop in there, and I got to know them pretty well too. Same thing for people that don't know, like drugs are a big part of that industry.
Yep.
You can get what you need.
I was a bouncer in a strip club for years.
Yeah. So, whatever you need is there. You just got to talk to the right people.
Yeah.
And so I would always go there to extend my night. And then I would leave there usually, 3:30, something like that. If I had enough on me, I'd go home and continue drinking. But if I didn't have booze at the house, I'd try to connect with people that had booze at their house, and I'd just go hang out with them. Because the goal was always to get to Saturday morning brunch. Because if I could get to mimosa time and still have a bag, like it's about to be a day. And I'd roll all through Saturday the same way and into Sunday, but my cutoff was always Sunday at 6.
Yeah.
That's what I would tell myself. And what I would do is I'd order stuffed crust pizza, pepperoni and banana peppers, and like Diet Coke or Coke, 2-liter to the house. And as soon as that got there, everything was done. I was good with that like 70% of the time, but there was 30% of the time that shit showed up, and I was like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'd roll into Monday, and you roll into Monday, now I'm calling in, right? And I'm just like, hey, I can't come to work today, So all that happened for years and years and years. The other thing that pops up, and I wanted to ask you about this within that part of the story, the company I worked for, we had a random program. And I remember being in like high level meetings and them being like, we need to get rid of the random program. Like people aren't doing drugs. I remember sitting there like, dude, yeah, okay. Like, and I remember even saying like, you guys are wrong. Like I said it out loud. Like you guys are wrong. Like people are, I don't know if it was like a cry for help.
Now, Jesus, you're telling on yourself?
Yeah, pretty much snitched on myself.
Damn.
And I was like, it's real. Like people are doing, like they're doing dope. I knew of people that I worked with. So like, yeah, of course, like it's happening. We don't need to get rid of this program because it is a little bit of a deterrent, not a big one, because I cheated them.
Yeah, me too.
The easiest thing, like if I was in a bind and I didn't have time to like get urine or anything like that, I would just flood myself knowing that it's going to come back diluted to buy me some time.
Yeah.
The problem was, I'll give you a prime example, and I've never shared this story publicly. I got pulled for a random. I was dirty. Went to, like down there, like you would go to GNC or Vitamin Shop or whatever, they had the drinks you could take that would essentially dilute everything.
Yeah, supposedly.
Yeah, and had to be within this window. So I got one of those, I pounded it, went and took the piss test. Like a week and a half went by, I didn't hear anything. So I'm thinking like, all right, we're good. Go on a trip. And on this trip, I won't dive into the details of who it was with or where it was at because that'll unfold way too much. But they were smoking pot, you know what I mean? And part of the celebration is they wanted everyone to smoke a blunt. I took a blunt to the face. I didn't even like smoking weed. Freaked me out. I come back from that trip, I land, I have an email like, hey, we need you to go retest because it came back diluted. But I remember being like, fuck, like, here we go. So what do? I go do the same thing again. I'm like, I'm just hydrated. Like I take care of myself. You got me working in all this heat. Like I drink 2 gallons of water a day. Like, what do What do you want me to do? You want me to dehydrate myself so your piss test works? And so I did it again, and somehow, some way it went through.
Okay.
In college, the way we would cheat them is everyone had a 5-hour energy in their locker.
Mm-hmm.
And the coaches knew. They'd tell us after practice, like, hey, these guys need to change out and go straight to the training ring. Well, everybody knew what that meant.
Yeah.
So
everyone's grabbing 5-hour energies.
yeah, pissing this. It's probably the same 6 guys pissing in every single
Right,
one. You know
right.
what I mean? Like everyone else was not great.
The punter, the kicker, the quarterback.
Yeah. So like, yeah, that's, everyone was cheating those things. So to dive into something else in your story, what that makes me think of, in the military, is there random programs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, dude, all the time.
Okay.
Dude, I shudder to think the years of my life that I've shaved off from stress and piss tests. I mean, dude, it's hard to even put it into words. Every day you show up, it could be a random.
Mm-hmm.
And so my Army experience was definitely different from my Air Force experience. My Air Force experience, I wasn't a full-fledged addict yet. So there was some clean time in there, but Army, I was pretty much dirty all the time. And so it was literally just 24/7 stress of when I was going to get pulled for a piss test. And so, I mean, now we're talking about a grown man walking around in a military uniform with a bottle of piss strapped to me at all times. You know what I mean? Duct taped to the second pair of boxers I'm wearing, just in case I have to pull them down. I got another pair over them so you can't see that. Or you get good at just like literally tucking a bottle up in between your, down there. And just constantly stressing about that stuff. You know, it's kind of, I cheated on my last piss test that would end up seeing me get out of the military. So I know I used clean piss. And I remember going in front of the colonel, and they were giving me my Article 15, telling me I failed the piss test, and he was looking me in my eyes, and he's sitting there, he's like, well, I didn't know what I know now back then. And so he looked me in the eyes and he told me I'd failed for heroin. And then I just wanted to sit there and debate him because I knew I didn't. Did I do heroin? Absolutely. Did I fail for heroin? No, because I used clean piss, and I know I used clean piss. But that's how dumb I was back then, because you don't fail. You fail for opiates. You don't fail for heroin. Right. So obviously somebody told him something. There was a guy that was in our unit that when we got back from Iraq, I know he had gotten a DUI, and then he never got DUI on base, and then never got in any trouble for it. So
this is a big deal, right?
Yeah, that would lead me to believe that it would have been that individual. But I'm completely in the wrong. I was doing wrong. I don't blame him. But yeah, dude, piss tests are a very real thing. I'll never forget. We were at our company, and they called a formation like midday, which is usually kind of rare. And then all of a sudden they started talking about piss tests, and you see people stressing, dude. And so the first sergeant, she was cool as hell. She was this hood lesbian chick from Atlanta. She didn't give a fuck. And she was just like, all right, yo, like right now, if you're dirty, fall out. This is your one shot. If you're dirty, fall out. And nobody fell out. And I was like, fuck it, I'm going. And so I went. And I remember my squad leader, who's passed away now, but I remember him, he's like, you motherfucker. And then a couple of us all went out. And so everybody thought they were like getting hit with the okey doke, like we were going to get piss tested. And she's like, all right, now the rest of y'all go piss. And so we didn't have to piss. But man, in all honesty, I went into her office and we went around, and she said, what are you going to pop for? What are you going to pop for? And I said, pain pills. And she goes, that don't count. And like sent me on my way. So, I mean, you've just given me the go ahead. You know what I mean? You don't even care about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was
yeah. Well, it's crazy to think about all the stress and cortisol in your body while you're an addict. Like, people don't talk about that a lot. It is constant. That feeling of waking up ridden with anxiety is never ending.
Bro, to be quite honest, man, in sobriety, I don't know that I've ever felt anxiety since, because that was real fucking anxiety. Anything I feel now doesn't even come close to compare to that feeling we used to get.
Yeah.
When you didn't have your dope, when you were sick, when, stressing a piss test, none of that compares to just regular everyday life.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I have like acute versions of that anxiety, but it's never like the duration of it's never the same.
No.
As it was during that time of my life. Like I remember like what it would feel like just to walk around all day wondering what's going on with the piss test.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on your mind all day. It's at the front of your mind. You don't care about anything else. You're not thinking about anything else. So that was always heavy for me. The other thing that was always heavy for me to carry around was like, who knows? right? Like who can tell?
Bro, I would drink water till I would like puke
Mhm.
and just keep puking water, keep drinking water, keep puking water.
That's why I used to do the same thing. That's why I find it hard to believe that this whole like theory that people OD on water all the time. I'm like, bro,
I mean, I've been to the point where I was sitting there fucking, you got
Yeah.
the shivers and the shakes from drinking so much water.
yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Like just like almost like toxic levels of hydration.
But you know what never dawned on me?
What?
Hey, don't do drugs.
Yeah.
We don't have to go through this.
Yeah.
It never dawned on me.
Yeah. Well, the anxiety thing's funny. And I talk about this in some of the speaking engagements with kids. Same with depression. Like, do I still have bouts of it? Yeah. Does it exist? Yeah. It doesn't ever like fully go away. But it got a lot better the day I stopped drinking and using.
100%.
So I try to tell them like, hey, if you're struggling with it and you're doing this, step one is like remove that and you'll feel better. But that's not something that's talked about when you're in it. It's just about the next time,
Yeah.
the next time, the next time. Another question I had for you that comes up frequently for me is people ask, did you ever relapse? Like, did you ever stop, get time, and then go back? How many of those stories do you have?
One. I've relapsed a bunch, you know, every time I left treatment relapsed. But the one I'm talking about, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I had 8 months. I had done 8 months inpatient at the VA, and I remember my sponsor at the time. I remember I was in my feelings one night because the town we were in, there was one meeting, small town. There was a big VA there. That's why I was there. But we go to the same meeting. It was the same exact people every night. They were saying the exact same thing. And it's just like after the 17th night in a row, I was just like, dude, no wonder we fucking stay sober. We're here every night. This is all we do. And we sit there and we get into this discussion, and I sit there and, you know, in my stuff, I talk about I talk about a recovery bubble, you know what I mean? Where we trap ourselves in this 12-step world, and that's all we live, eat, and breathe it. He was talking about a recovery bubble. He was telling me I was in a bubble that I didn't quite realize yet. And so I was at the VA, and you could kind of come and go. You had a 10 p.m. curfew, but once the doors are open, you can come and go as you please. So, yes, I was in treatment, but I still had a job. I was on and off property every day in restaurants, stores. And so I'm sitting there telling him, I'm like, bro, I'm good, man. I'm good. And I was like, I know where the dope man lives. I go to the store all the time. I don't ever have that thing. I don't ever want to drink or anything like that. And he's like, yeah, man, but you're trapped in a bubble right now. He's like, you know, when you go back to the VA at night, one of the nurses could see your eyes, piss test you, or you could get a breathalyzer, you could have a slip on your bed, you got to go pee. So that's enough in the back of your head to not do it. The true test will be when you get out. And yeah, bro. First week out, I'm in a hotel room, got fucked up. Almost immediately. And it was about a week, and it was that last dip my toe back in, and it was like a realization moment where I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not good at this anymore. I can't do this, because it just, within 1 week, just all completely came unraveled. And so that it was the last dip of the toe I needed in, where it was like, all right, man, that's it.
Was there a thought in your mind, like from the time you picked up the bag, from the time that you put it in your arm, or wherever you put it, of like, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing this?
No, I was still under the delusion that I was a drug addict, but not an alcoholic.
Okay.
So I said, I think it was my birthday, December 24th. So I was like, man, I can have a couple beers. And like you, we could leave here today and I could have 2 beers and I could be fine. I'll go home, won't think about getting high, nothing like that. And I could do that repeatedly, you know, but eventually it'll be like, all right, you know, I could have a 3rd beer. I'll be cool. And when you get that 4th beer, I mean, that's where it's like, all right, let's get it going.
Let's cut it loose. Yeah, I have that conversation with quite a few people, actually, what you just highlighted. People that have got some sobriety time. And like, man, I just want to test it out.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the one thing I'm grateful for is like, I can't go look those kids in the eyes and be like, well, I can socially have a beer or 2 now. That's not the promise. Right. So I have that additional level of accountability.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have that same life. So like their level of accountability is really just to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of people being like, yeah, like it's great. Like I can have like a nightcap now. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's always in the back of my head though. Like, yeah, but what if?
Yeah.
That nightcap can turn into a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then you're having it at dinner. You know what I mean?
So yeah, to those people, I just don't think I never loved the taste of beer. I never loved the taste of alcohol. You know what I mean? I acquired it,
Right.
but it wasn't ever something where I was like, ah. So like the thought of having one drink to me just does not, for what? It's not going to do anything. Why are we going to?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think there are people that do enjoy it, though. They're like, this tastes great. They love craft beers. I think craft beers taste like ass.
Never even had one.
It's trash. So it's not even worth the attempt. Or they like the way that like Scotch tastes. I'm like, Scotch tastes like ass. You know what I mean? I didn't like none of that shit.
All right.
I would use it, but I didn't like it.
Exactly.
You brought up something else, this recovery bubble concept. And I get this question a lot. And I'm pretty sure after hearing your story, you might get this question a bit too. But I think it opens up a pretty unique dialogue for both of us to have a conversation around 12-step programs.
Mm-hmm.
I am no longer like involved with my own personal journey in a 12-step program.
Mm-hmm.
Are you?
No.
Okay. I would like to take a minute to dive in for each of us why that's the case. How long were you involved in a 12-step program into your recovery?
First couple years, I'd say, very heavily at the beginning. Basically, if not every, almost every day. I don't want to say every day, but very heavily at the beginning. And that's honestly what don't want to throw opinion out there, but that's what you should do. You're setting up your foundation. Anybody that's newly getting sober, absolutely. Like, fuck paying $30,000 to go to treatment and all that. There's a free program that where you go pay $30,000, they're teaching you the same shit. You can get it for free out here.
Mm-hmm.
And these people are doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're not being paid to do it.
Right.
That's another very good point of that. So, I'm sorry, what was the question?
How long were you involved in 12-step?
A large part of my story is about running and about the running community, which yours is too. And so I think that put us in a very unique position because most addicts, most people coming out are unable to find that good, healthy community. So the natural default is the recovery community. You and I stumbled into the running community and found this other thing. I did both for a while. The one thing that I learned in my entire experience and speaking is what taught me that, telling my story, is that at the end of the day, you're using your experience to help other people. And so the same thing of, we've all been to a meeting where there's that dude in there that knows the big book front to back. He's got 20 sponsees. Every time he talks, he spits fire, shuts the meeting down. That's awesome, man. We need people like that. It's just not me. But I identified what that person was doing, using their experience to help other people. And then I've been, through one way or another, I've been put in this position where I've been able to do that same thing, just in a different avenue, whether that's speaking, whether that's running, whether that's podcast, social media, any of these things. That is my goal. Everything I do, I use my experience to help other people. Now, my life is better than it's ever been. I have a beautiful wife, a beautiful home, a dog, good people around me, all these things. I'm in touch with the 12-step community, but I'm not submerged in it. I think if I got back to a point where I was on rocky ground where I started thinking about, or, that started becoming something that was popping up in my head, I would absolutely go back. If anybody invites me to a meeting, I'll go. If someone wants me to give a chip or something like that, I'll go like that. But it's just, I used it as my foundation. I keep in touch with it, but it's not my day-to-day life anymore.
Yeah, I love how you put that. I can relate to that on a million different levels. I have nothing against 12-step.
No.
I celebrate it, meaning like, I think if anyone ever comes to me and they're in a bind, they're struggling, they're in that mode.
Mm-hmm.
The best possible advice that I know to give them is find a meeting.
Yep.
I don't know of anything better. I won't ever say like, go to detox or go run a mile. Like, none of that. It's go to a meeting.
Yeah.
Get your desire chip and just see what happens. Because the other thing that's not talked about, like, rehab programs in the United States have a pretty large relapse rate. You could almost argue that AA programs have a better outcome than these rehab facilities. And that's because I believe, to what you said, people are there for the right reasons. Like, to sponsor someone, that's being of service. That's giving your time. It's not a paid position. There's no check at the end of it if they're successful. And so you're investing part of yourself in these people. And so I think that naturally creates additional layers of accountability, right? If you're my sponsor, you are going to feel a level of accountability to stay in straight and right. Because if you're not, like, what does that tell me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that always works, but it does help. And I think for me, very similarly, I remember my last AA meeting, and I was sitting there, and I got sober during COVID. So Zoom was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in 9 months, I went to like 3 meetings a day for 9 months because of Zoom. I wasn't driving to 3 meetings a day, but I could take them from work. I could take them from home. And I remember the last one I was in, there was someone who came on and shared. They'd like found a phone to call in from somebody else. They were really fucking struggling. You could hear it in their voice. You know that sound where it's like trembling, like white knuckling, struggling. I need help. And they're sharing that. And in AA, in those meetings, and a lot of them, like, there's no crosstalk.
Mm-hmm.
There's no opportunity to be like, bro, hit me. Like, hit my line. You know what I mean? I got you. Like, where are you at? Just goes to the next share. And I'll never forget that moment of being like, fuck, like, we got to do something. We got to go help this dude. Like, why is no one else feeling this? You know what I mean? Like, I felt pulled.
This is why we're here.
Right.
This guy.
The next share was a woman upset, right? And perception is reality. I understand all that shit. But lack of awareness also pisses me off. She starts sharing, she's upset because her masseuse had to reschedule for tomorrow versus today. And she was worried that was going to trigger her into like being anxious and needing to drink. And I remember being like, this is fucking bullshit.
Right.
And so I got off the meeting. But before I got off, I remember being like, Trip, if you step away from this, you have to commit to service in your way. And that's what I did. It was shortly after that I opened up about my story, started being vulnerable with that. I think that was the first step for me.
Yeah.
And I even caught flack, even when the podcast started. It was kind of like that I was towing the line of anonymity. I'm like, I've never said a word about anybody who's in the program.
Right.
I will say that there's people of all different backgrounds in the program and experiences and job titles, but that's not ruining anyone's anonymity. That's just real shit. And so,
and you're talking about people's stories. You're not talking about fucking AA.
Right. Correct.
If we don't talk, bro, there's a reason there's a fucking stigma in this country on addiction because nobody wants to talk about this shit.
Right.
Like,
it's the secret society shit. AA also plays into that.
Yeah.
Like you have a group of people that their primary focus is recovery, but not far off from that is anonymity.
Mm-hmm.
So you're safe here to not be exposed.
Yeah. And that, bro, yeah, you shouldn't break my anonymity, but can't nobody tell me I can't talk about my stuff publicly or anything like that. So yeah.
I think a lot of it's envy. Right.
Probably.
I think a lot of it's that, like if someone looked at your story and was like, oh, this is actually a good thing to hit on. He's monetizing this. Bro, I haven't made $1.
Bro, I've dumped so much fucking money into this shit.
Yeah. And I'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
But I haven't made $1.
Right.
People think like we have no sponsor. My podcast isn't sponsored. No one paid for my shirts. No one paid for my hats. No one pays for me to travel to Virginia. No one pays me to speak to these kids.
Right.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm in it. I have no issue there. But
no one pays me as my wife wants to fight with me because I'm not giving her any time because I'm posting clips for you fools.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
But yeah, it's real.
Yeah.
And if you have to be able to take a step back and say, regardless of what someone does with their experience, if they're making an attempt to connect with people and help them, you have to respect it. Because at the end of the day, my thing went back to this. What about the people that don't make it in the rooms?
Mm-hmm.
What about that guy on that phone call? Who's doing the outreach there?
Yeah.
Who's connecting with people in the community that are homeless or like they're not going to a meeting? How do you connect with them? Like what, people, when you hide from it or hide with it, you're not helping anyone other than yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And that's fine. Don't get me wrong. But to me, the quickest way to help the most people is to go public with your shit.
100%. And dude, let me say something just for people that might be under misguided going back to talking about treatment and center and stuff. If you got a loved one that needs help and anything, like, I just need you to know, like, the national statistic for somebody that goes and does 30 days of inpatient treatment and leaves and goes on about their life is 0.02. That is the most staggering fucking statistic I've ever heard in my life, right? So what that tells me, and what everybody at home listening to this should know, there's no treatment center on this planet that will save your loved one. What they will do is prepare them for the work that comes after, which is going to end up being 12 steps or some form of that in another way. So this delusion that some treatment, if any treatment center is telling you that they're going to cure you or make you all better like that, they're lying to you flat out. They can't do it. It's impossible. You don't fix problems that we've been doing this for years in a 30 or 60 or 90-day stay. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to talk about, because that number you just gave represents 2%, 0.02. It's 2% success rate. Name another business model in the United States where a 2% success rate is massively wealthy. You can't. They wouldn't be in business.
No.
Right? And it also makes you question, like, not just the motives and morals of people that are involved with those things. Like, they know that.
Yeah.
They know that statistic, but they're also pumping out this message that, like, we have the greatest success rate because of X, Y, and Z. And it's so true. The success is, I believe, dependent on the willingness of the individual. Are they willing to do what it takes?
Yeah.
Right? You can get the baseline, but you got to think.
Do you know how treatment centers get those success rates?
No. Elaborate.
How do you think?
I don't know.
To call up the client and ask them if they're still sober.
Okay.
Now, how many of us are telling the truth on that fucking phone?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, dude, fucking awesome.
You know what I mean?
Like,
Yeah.
anyways.
The question then becomes, like, you have to think about it this way. Depending on the drug, or if it's alcohol, the actual detox frame is anywhere from days to weeks, right? If you send a loved one to a 30-day program, they might get 14 days of actual exposure to that program. The other half is detox, which
usually you're going to a detox somewhere else and the programs are separated. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless, I mean, you got some of these one-stop shops that, you know what I mean? Like, that right there is where, you know what I mean? If you got a detox, a fucking inpatient treatment center, an IOP, a PHP, a sober living, like, why would you want to cure anybody? You just keep them going in your secular form of care.
Well, that's where the money conversation comes in, right? And it's the same as pharmaceuticals. They know the shit's wrong. They know the shit doesn't really do what we say it does, but they keep the cycle going because the cycle makes people a lot of money.
Yep.
And there's some people that can walk around and sleep just fine at night knowing they're killing people, and they're in control of that cycle. But at the end of the day, like, when I think about, because people ask me, like, oh, your experience must not have been that bad because you didn't go to rehab. And I was like, no, I didn't. It was on the table. Like, that was part of the conversation. I was basically given 3 options the day I got sober and woke up and, like, talked to a therapist. And I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And they were like, here's your 3 options. You agree to go to a meeting every day. If you don't do that, then I need you in, like, an outpatient program, or we can get you into a 30-day. And the stubborn side of me, which it paid off, I'm not saying it's like this for everyone, was like, fuck, I'll do a meeting a day. Like, I'm going to backfill the rest of this time with other really crazy hard shit. But I only felt that way because I actually had the willingness to not go back.
Right.
But it takes a deep hole to get to that point. You know what I mean? And that depends on the individual.
Right.
But I remember being like, okay, he said 1 meeting a day, I'm going to do 3. And if I'm not in a meeting, I'm going to be running. If I'm not running, I'm going to be lifting. If I'm not lifting, I'm going to be reading. If I'm not reading, I'm going to be working. If I'm not working, I'm going to be sleeping. Like, I didn't give myself a lot of space.
Yeah.
And so people, there's 2 conversations to be had around that. That's part of the bubble, right? If you eliminate any opportunity to fuck up, you're in a bubble.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there is power in establishing structure to your life
100%.
and then slowly transitioning versus, like, this rehab model where it's fully controlled to, like, go. Like, no one's ready for that. If I'd have went 0 to 102, I'd have fell off. And so, you know, but I was fortunate. I was blessed to not have these moments of, like, urges. but it's because I didn't open my eyes or pick my head up for 15 months, bro.
Yeah. Do you want to know what one of the most helpful things I developed in treatment was?
What?
A morning routine.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the most impactful things, because I know my morning routine before was roll up, fucking take my sick ass to the bathroom and sit there and start pounding on a bunch of cottons. Now, all of a sudden, when you've changed your morning routine to I wake up early, I pray, I fucking meditate, I go for my run, come back, I'm showered, my bed's made, like, bro, that's starting your day in a whole different mindset and state than you have for the previous 15 years, however long it was, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I still have that morning routine to this day.
Yeah.
It's something I take comfort in. It's something I love doing. I love my fucking morning routine, but it's trying to help people develop those things of like, all right, how can we best support your day for whatever you're about to do?
I mean, for exposure and to help people, what is your morning routine?
Most people don't believe me, but there's an emergency alarm set on my phone for 2:30 a.m. that never goes off. I'm usually up by 2 a.m., give or take a couple minutes, have my coffee, mess around with my dog for a little bit. I have a Doberman, her ears are not clipped, and so she's constantly like shaking her head. And so I'll get up in the morning and I go out and I'm making my coffee, and I'll sit there and start looking at, social media, whatever business stuff I got to do. And then she usually comes out and hangs out with me, and I'll let her out. And then, bro, it's funny. I'll sit down on the couch. I let her in. I'll sit down on the couch, and then she comes and she sits up like a person right next to me. And then I get a napkin and I scratch in her ears for her, and she'll sit there and be like, oh, like she loves it. So it's one of my favorite things about the morning, but that's when I get a lot of my work done. It's my favorite time of the day. My wife works at home, so there's not a whole lot of like home alone time where I could do this stuff. So that's where I look at my sports, fire off emails, engage social media stuff I got to do for the day. And then I'm usually out the door by around 4:30. I eat about 3:30, a little pre-workout meal, get my clothes and everything ready for the day. And I'm out the door 4:30, in the gym by 5, or running, doing whatever I'm doing for the day. And that's every day.
Yeah.
Sunday's rest day.
Well, and to verify all that, like I think this morning I had a text at like 3:31.
I try to wait.
Well, I mean, it doesn't, my phone goes on like off.
I know most people's are silent, but that's when my ideas are coming. That's when I'm like, oh, got to text him, got to get back with him, like that.
Take advantage of that.
Yeah, dude, once the day starts, my mind's everywhere. So
Yeah.
then I'm like a squirrel.
There's other people that talk about that too, like Jocko, The Rock.
Yeah.
They're like, man, this is your window where your responsibility is you. Because once the world wakes up, as a man, your responsibility quickly shifts from you to everything around.
Yeah.
And so you have to almost take that time, or else you're always playing catch up.
Right.
So no, I think that the morning routine is important. And I think, to your point, people need to find what works for them,
Mm-hmm.
what gives them the most time to themselves, what allows them to be the most productive, what sets them up to be the best throughout the course of the day. Like there's certain people, you wake them up at 2:30 every day, they're going to be in a dark spot by noon. You know what I mean? It doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I wasn't natural like this either. Did I ever tell you why I originally started getting up early like that?
No.
I didn't tell you this?
No.
Oh. So early off in my running career, downtown Austin would be where a lot of those runs would happen. So I'd wake up early. I'd be downtown early. I'd always meet people. We'd be doing a run group or something. I'd meet people for early miles. And so we happened to be downtown Austin running around. It was about 4 a.m. or 4:30. And all of a sudden my stomach went like that. And I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? It's 4:30 in the morning. There's nothing open. So I'm freaking out. Like, I'm going to have to dip down an alley. Like, holy shit, what am I going to do? Thankfully, I made it till Starbucks opened at 5. And so I slid in there. But I was like, all right, never again. I'm not going through that again. And so then I would wake up, started getting up an hour early before I would go run, so I could have a cup of coffee, handle my business and everything like that. And it just developed into my favorite time of the day. So
makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you're a runner, you know exactly what he's talking about. That bottom out feeling is like, there's nothing you can do. You got to go handle it. So, I mean, there's nothing worse than starting a run and you haven't already done that.
Yeah.
Because it's coming.
Yeah.
So, I'm with you on that for sure. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about within like your addiction, which I found to be interesting. I saw a clip that you posted talking about when you were overseas, you were on deployment and needing to feed your addiction at that time. I think that that's a really interesting conversation because I don't think a lot of people think about that. They're like, oh, like he's at war, he's sober. Can you walk me through like pre-deployment, the weeks before, like what were you, like where your head was at? Were you planning? What were you doing into the actual deployment and then returning home?
Yeah. So I gotten injured, and the military was giving me painkillers. I was obviously doing stuff on my own as well. But once deployment came, I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly, I had gotten a bunch of methadone and was like going to wean myself off because I knew we were going. I had no idea what to expect once we got over there. Unfortunately for me, the culture in the military at that time was if you're not ready to go, you're fucking worthless. And so people start treating you as such. I'm a very competitive person. I'm not going to let that happen. And so I amassed everything I could, did whatever I could to make sure I deployed. And so we get over there, and that was physically the worst thing I could have done for my back. And so it's just constantly day after day, putting your gear on, hopping down off different trucks and everything. You're walking around in the desert all day, all this different type of shit. And so once you're over there for a little bit, then you start kind of getting a feel for things. Then mail starts rolling in. Then all of a sudden you start seeing people getting little pints of liquor bottles, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Then you start realizing they're not checking the mail. Maybe they are, but people are. After you're over there for a while, things start changing. People start getting real comfortable, and they're miserable because they're away from home. So it's just kind of like, fuck it. Everybody's just kind of whatever. So, I mean, I had made friends with medics, and so I had started getting, what the fuck are they called? They're not pain pills, but they are. They hit the same receptors in your brain, but they're not.
Like Toradol?
Yeah, no, not Toradol. Like Toradol, though. Toradol's a shot. What's the pill forms of those shits?
I don't know.
Damn. I forget what they're, someone knows what I'm talking about, but so I would take those. Then guys would start going home on leave and bringing stuff back, and then I'd give them money. And then, I even had I even manipulated my mom into sending me liquor and stuff like that. And then you start making friends with the Iraqis. And so hopefully the statute of limitations is passed on this, but at one point I was so injured, they ended up sticking me out at a fuel point. And so basically I would just man this fuel point as all these convoys were coming through. And so I realized that I'm in charge of the numbers as far as how much fuel is coming in and out, so I could fuck with the numbers. So then the Iraqi guys, one thing we were doing was we were rebuilding Iraq. We had leveled it, and now we're still at danger with insurgents and stuff like that, but we're not at war with Iraq. We're trying to help the Iraqi army. So what the military does to help rebuild them is we start hiring a lot of Iraqis to come on base and do a lot of work. One of the things they would come on and do is empty our porta potties. So they would drive these big fuel trucks on, but they were water trucks. And then they would have these huge, 200-300 gallon tanks on the side. And so they would come through, and I had one guy at first, and then eventually I had a whole fleet of people. But you start filling up their side gas tanks, and they'll pay you cash. I had a 14-year-old kid that would drive the truck for his dad. And so this little 14-year-old Iraqi kid would drive on a U.S. military base and go do all the things, and then he'd come, I'd fuel him up. Well, he was my liquor connect. So he could get me, over in Iraq, a pint of BV, $75, easy. So he was getting me, and it's all generic shit liquor and all that stuff, but he would be able to go to downtown Baghdad and get me like Absolute vodka, like good shit. And then I could take that fifth and make a water bottle and, sell a water bottle for $75. So all of a sudden now I'm like the liquor connect, and I have people from all different bases coming to see me, and then I'm selling fucking fuel. So, I mean, this is not anything good. I'm not fucking proud of what I did, but I was a drug addict and I was over in Iraq, and so I was finding my way. But all that to say, eventually my back would get so injured that they were going to have to ship me over into the green zone. This is what you wanted to know, right? So they're going to ship me over into the green zone. The green zones basically was like where Saddam's palaces were and all that stuff. And so I get shipped over there, and they're going to give me prescription painkillers and steroid injections. And so my back is fucked at this point. So they shipped me over there, and I remember it was a Fulberg colonel, one of the highest ranks you're going to get as an officer. Generals, you don't see maneuver around the base a lot. You don't even really see them. But if you see a colonel, like, that's a very high-ranking dude, not somebody you want to play with. And so he happened to, for whatever reason, be my doctor, and I remember he wrote me a prescription for 90 Percocet and sent me out to the Black Hawk to get shipped off to the green zone. And those 90 Percocets were gone before we ever hit the ground in the green zone. So immediately I get off, walk right into the emergency room in the green zone, tell them I'm in tremendous pain. They write me a script for 30 more Percocets. Those are gone before the next morning. Then I go in to see a major, and he's going to write me a prescription, and it was either for 90 or 120 Percocet. I remember they were in the tinfoil fucking push tab things. And the bay that they had us sleeping in, there was no like doors on the lockers. They were just open cubbies. So I was like, oh, they got stolen. And so here I had these 120 Percocets I knocked out in like 2 days. So now I'm going back to this major to try to get more. And he's like, no, I can't do it. I'm sorry. So I was like, fuck. So there was a girl there that I kind of been talking to a little bit in my couple days there, and she was cool. And so I was asking her like, hey, are the computer systems connected from here to where I'm going back over at Camp Taji? And she's like, no, you're good. They were. So she was wrong. And so I get back to camp, unless that or she was playing a joke on me. So as I'm getting shipped back to Camp Taji, which is the largest military installation that we have in Iraq, I dip back into the emergency room right before I leave, and they give me 30 Percocets. So now I go back to Camp Taji. I land there, go to see the Fulberg colonel, and I was like, he talks to me, chats me up, and he's like, is there anything else I could do for you? And I was like, yeah, if you write me a refill on the prescription, I ran out of the pills that you gave me last time. He's like, oh, okay, when's the last time you had one? And I was like, well, the last one that you gave me. And he goes, oh. And he looks down at his pad, and he's like, so you didn't go into the emergency room as soon as you got over there? Now, that right there should have been my indicator that he knew everything.
Mm.
But my dumb drug addict ass at the time was not going to take that for an answer. So I was like, oh, yeah, oh, I did, blah, 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 blah. And so he's like, okay, again, I'll ask you, when's the last time you had a Percocet? And I was like, well, when I ran out of those. He goes, oh, so you didn't get 120 from the major? And I was like, I did, but they got stolen. There's a report. You can check it out. And he goes, okay, so when's the last time you had a Percocet? And I was like, well, the last time that I had taken one of those. He goes, so what about the 30 you got? Bro, and it just went. And he caught me in every single one. And I lied all the way till I got back to Camp Taji to him. And I just remember the way he did it. You're really scared of a guy with that rank. Military, you expect to be yelled at, but when they start speaking really calmly, it's even more scary.
Mm.
And so he started off very calmly, and he's like, Mr. Livingston, do you have any idea how much trouble you can get into lying to an officer in the United States military, let alone a full-bird fucking colonel? And he just starts laying into me. The entire medical place could hear me. And then later that evening, I go walking into the chow hall, and a dude comes up to me, and he was like, you're fucking Livingston? And I was like, yeah, why? He goes, I can't get my pills because of you. And then all of a sudden I start seeing eyes looking at me and shit like that. Here I come to find out they shut the largest military installation that we have in Iraq. They shut down completely on painkillers. So,
Damn.
nothing to be proud of. Kids, don't lie to a colonel.
Last question on that, just to finish that. What was the feeling like on the plane ride home?
Coming home from Iraq?
Yeah, were you like anticipating getting high? Were you anticipating, where was your head?
I mean, probably everywhere. Elated you're going home. Elated you're going to be back stateside. The thing that's kind of, for a young kid or a partier or somebody that has addiction issues, you have to understand you thrust this into an environment where your adrenaline is pumping every day. If you're going outside of the wire and everything like that, you're on 10 every day, 10, 12. And then all of a sudden that comes to an end. And I'll be honest, even in my addiction and everything like that, I was still very proud to serve my country. I was still very proud that I was fighting for my country, still very proud to have served in Iraq. And it gives you another sense of worth that, especially as an addict, I didn't have stateside. Like, because now I have purpose. My family's proud of me. Everybody's excited. Well, then you go back to the States all of a sudden and you're thrust back into this boring life of nothing going on. But you're used to turning shit up to 10. So you start seeing a lot of people finding that behavior, whether it's riding motorcycles fast or fast car, drugs, alcohol, women, whatever it is. And you've been making hazardous duty pay for the past year, 15 months. You can't spend any of your money over there. And I was making all this extra money over there. So now it's just like, let's come home and ball out. And so it was just, the wheels come off for a lot of people once you get back. That's where you start seeing a lot of the manifestations of PTSD. And things that you had been through over there come start rearing their head.
Is it because they finally have a window to show up?
I mean, yeah, combination of all that thing, just lack of structure and accountability. Things are everybody's ready to relax and unwind. You come back R&R, you know what I mean? When you actually start going back into work, things are chill. And so everybody's fully embraced that, and so they're ready to let loose. Another thing that I don't think gets talked about too, and I don't mean to go on too long, but I think what I came to realize in the military is, you know, not across the board, but I'd say a large number of people look at the type of expendable type American people that the military attracts. You know what I mean? Like, I was not somebody that was going to do well in college. I was not somebody that had a whole lot of opportunities. It's my own fault, but the military is where it goes. You know, you hear stories back in the day of people getting in trouble and going to court, and it's like, cool, you're either going to jail or you're going to the Marine Corps. And so you have to understand the type of people. A lot of these people come from broken homes, fucked up childhoods, childhood traumas, bad neighborhoods, all these things. They're going to try to get out of that, but they're still have these lifetime of bad habits and, you know, bad morals. You know, I'm not saying people are bad. I'm just saying,
Right.
dealt a tough hand sometimes.
Well, and that's the same conversation around, you can remove the drug and the drink, but what got you to that point is still there.
Exactly.
And so that's another conversation around recovery. And I'll ask you this question. I think that this is important. Do you and are you a believer? Like, do you partake in therapy, and are you a believer in therapy as a man?
Yes.
Okay. I think this is important.
Yeah, I've been doing therapy recently. You know, I think I had hit a point in my recovery and in life and everything like that where it was just time to add on. It was time to try something new. You know, the program was amazing. The program didn't do much for me as far as childhood trauma, things that happened to me. You know, why am I the way I am? You know, stuff from your father, stuff you pick up from other family members and stuff like that. And so that's a lot of the work we're doing now. You know, I was blessed to have an amazing stepdad come into my life at an early age. And, you know, he really embodied the man that I want to be in my life. Unfortunately, I went through a lot of my life without a father. You know, my father, I love him to death. He has issues of his own. And so it's the way my therapist describes it. It's like, Shawn, you see the person you want to be, but, you know, you're programmed to be this other person. So it's this struggle. And so I would have never known that had I not done therapy. A lot of the situations and the way I show up, you know, wanting to be a fucking tough guy, or I can't do that because then I'll look weak and all that stuff. A lot of that stuff's bullshit that comes from this way that I was programmed before. When I went into therapy, dude, it was like, I just want to know why I am the way I am. There was a lot of questions I had that I couldn't be answered anywhere else. And so I really enjoyed it. I would, anybody that's interested, I would absolutely, as long as you find a good therapist, I think it could do really good things for you.
Yeah. I think part of that conversation too is, a lot of the men that I know that I look up to, that I admire their strength, their courage, their tenacity, their masculinity, they're involved in therapy. And
Really?
so, you know, some of the baddest dudes I've ever met. And so it's really hard for anyone to make the argument that that makes you soft. I think really the hardest thing you can do is peel back layers of this onion that expose your truth, your vulnerabilities, like the things that make you weak.
Yeah.
Right. That's the only way you can work on them though. And so, you know, there is a stigma around therapy. I carried it for a while. I didn't want to talk about it for a while. And I still have people that are acquaintances of mine that are like, you know, they'll come to me for advice on something they're dealing with. And if it's not drug or alcohol related, usually the next thing that I'm like, you know, tell them to go try is therapy.
Yeah.
Go talk to a professional. And a lot of times that feedback is like, well, I'm not quite there. Like, it's not that bad. And I'm like, it's bad enough where you're coming to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's more about you're not comfortable enough, but it should be uncomfortable to go talk about those things and deal with those things. What people need to know though, is a good therapist is going to give you, like, whatever you uncover that day in therapy, they're going to give you the tools necessary to deal with that.
Yeah.
Until you get back. That's my view on a good therapist. Now, if you go in there and you dump all your problems out and they say, all right, see you next week. Like, I would struggle with that. Cause it's like, dude, I just laid myself out raw for you. And and now I don't know what to do with it.
Right.
I don't know how to deal with this information. That was also part of the 12 steps that I found to be a little bit confusing. You do all this inventory, you write all this information out, and the inventory gets a lot of people. And so does like 8 and 9 when it comes time to like make amends.
Yeah.
It grabs a lot of people. I think that program in combination with therapy is the secret sauce, right? Because the therapist is giving you the tools to deal with these things as you're like just dumping them out, because it's heavy. You know what I mean? You're looking at things that you never thought you would look at again.
Yeah.
Or things that you spent years covering up. If you don't have the tools to process those, the quickest and easiest fix is to go back to the drink or the drug.
Right. Well, yeah, dude. Somebody writes down a 4-step and, they're doing their 5th step and there's all these things they're so ashamed of that they've done, right? So many things in my addiction, it's like, that's a completely different human being. Like, I don't understand the thought process, any of the shit that I did, but it was me. Why did I do this stuff? I still don't understand why I did this stuff. This lady I go see does, though. She helps me with that shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, yeah, man, we've talked about it, I think, on the last episode. I am all for anything that helps somebody, as long as it's not a detriment to you or anybody else. If it is improving your recovery or your life, I'm all for it. I don't care if it's a medication, a drug, a therapy, a fucking practice, do it.
I was going to ask you about this too. Hallucinogenics. There's been an uptick in conversation around how that can assist with mental, emotional health and addiction.
Yeah.
And I got to see it. You had a guest on your show
Mm-hmm.
that kind of dove into that.
Yeah.
I think I know the answer, but I think the audience should hear it. What is your view on that treatment method for those types of things?
Well, if it helps you, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
All for it. So then I go back to, and this is this is definitely not a 12-step take. This is my take, but, and hopefully I didn't say this in the last episode, but for me, weed, I don't think weed is a hallucinogen, but I kind of put weed in the same category as hallucinogens. They're like these other things. It's not like coke, not like crack, not like fucking heroin, all that shit. But it was as normal for me to wake up and shove a needle into my arm as it is for regular people to wake up and brush their teeth. I was never a big weed guy. Weed never got me where I wanted to be. But on the rare occasions that it was around and I would smoke, that was the only time it would register into my brain truly what I was doing to myself. And so I never had any qualms about shoving needles in my body. The rare occasion I'd smoke weed, I'd sit there and be like, oh my God, what am I doing to myself? I'm literally shoving needles into my fucking body. Like, it would make me think in a rational brain. Now, I've always just had a tough time putting that in the same category as I do the other drugs. There's a lot of soldiers I know. There's a lot of people I know that find good health benefits from marijuana or hallucinogens. If you're honestly somebody that has an issue with it, you can't do it. But same thing as people having an issue with sugar or fucking anything else that's too much or done in excess. But if you're doing it under a doctor's care or somebody that knows what the fuck they're doing, and you're actually having that therapeutic benefit from it, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
If you used to fucking shove needles in your body every day and all that stuff, and you were shooting heroin, you've been in prison, whatever like that, and now you smoke a little bit of weed or, you microdose mushrooms or whatever in the evening time because that's what helps your anxiety, awesome. You're sober in my book.
Yeah. No, I like that outlook and I agree with it. I think that you have to be able to look at each situation for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's trade-offs. I hate to say it that way, but like if it were my child and the option is addicted to heroin or former addiction to heroin and needs to microdose mushrooms to stay even for the rest of their lives, I'm taking the shrooms.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I hear you. I wish it was nothing. For sure. I wish it didn't have to be that. But that's better, you know what I mean, than the other route. And so that leads me into another conversation, because I know if you're open to talking about your experience with the legal system a little bit, we talked about it a little bit on the first episode, but I wanted to go a little deeper. Something similar to like going to war. It sounds like you still had opportunity over there to stay even or find your fix.
Yeah.
What is the prevalence of that in like incarceration?
I mean, everybody in there is a fucking addict, but and particularly where I was, I never saw like hard drugs or anything like that. Granted, I only did 2 years. I think a lot of those, when you get to the units where motherfuckers are doing like 20 plus or they're doing life, you probably see more of that there. But at the end of the day, everybody, even in county, it's a bunch of drug addicts. So, I mean, I remember being in county and we were rolling up spinach and smoking spinach just to catch a buzz. There's dudes trading soups for Seroquel pills or fucking any other pills that's coming through the pill window. So the addiction bug is still definitely there. Guys trying to fucking save their fruit and all that stuff to make hooch, stuff like that, but never anything big.
Is there 12-step programs in?
County, you would have people bring in H&Is and come in there, bring the little red big books and stuff like that. I don't remember seeing any of my TDC unit. TDC, a lot of people get into church pretty heavy. I was definitely in the Bible in church when I was in there.
Yeah.
But I think on my unit, I don't know that I heard anything I would ever heard 12-step felt like a little bit of home to me. So I would have definitely been there.
Mm-hmm. You brought up faith, the church just now leads me into another question. What's your outlook on faith, God? Like, what is your view on all that? How does it work for you?
Huge God guy. How much time we got?
30 minutes.
Have I ever told you my God story?
No, but I'm here for it.
I haven't ever told you this?
I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think so.
That's the best one I got. We could fucking close it after this.
No.
So one of my biggest issues and biggest problems, I'd say, in recovery or in life in general, was there was a time in my life where I wasn't a big God guy. It's not that I didn't believe in God. I knew there was something out there. I just didn't know what I believed. And so I always make the joke, I don't know if it's because I listened to too much Rogan and I just started questioning everything, but I started thinking like, man wrote the Bible. I can't trust man. How could I really trust that? And so I just started questioning everything. And because I couldn't put it in a box, I just didn't know what I believed. And so this story I'm about to tell you is what let me know without a shadow of a doubt that God is very, very real in my life. I don't care what anybody else has to say. And so as I was getting kicked out of the Army, it was the one time they would try to send me to treatment to get help. Now, they ended up sending me to a place called Texas Star here in Austin. It was a 30-day facility. And so, mind you, I was not concerned at all with getting sober. I was trying to get out of trouble. I was trying to salvage my military career. And so I get shipped off to this treatment center. And one thing I'll say is my MO always was hang around the funny guys. It doesn't matter if I was in the military, school, work, prison. I hang around the funny guys. We're going to talk shit. That's how we're going to pass time. So I walk up into this treatment center and immediately I see this guy. He's 6-7 years younger than me, funny as hell. And I'm like, oh, here we go. That's my rehab homie right there. We're going to ride this out. So we're in there. We're talking shit. We're talking during groups. We're talking to girls, doing everything you shouldn't be doing in treatment. Then I break the cardinal rule and start dating one of the girls in the treatment center. Biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. We get out of treatment. I end up in the most toxic 2-year relationship known to mankind. Equally my fault. And so in this 2 years that we got out and we're together, I start getting in trouble with the law. I catch my 2 first felonies for heroin possession, but now I got to go away. But I'm good, man. I got my girl. She's going to hold me down. She's going to put money on my books and write me. All my homeboys are going to hold me down. That did not happen. So I go away. I do 2 years completely on my own. No letters, no money, no nothing. And so I go to get out. I come back to Austin and I make the logical drug addict decision that I'm lonely and I've been in prison. So now I got to look the girl up. So I look her up. Come to find out she's now with my young homeboy from the treatment center. So me being me at the time, I start texting her. She starts sneaking around behind his back to come see me. We're partying, we're hooking up. He finds out about me. So now he's texting me, he's calling me. We're going back and forth. We're going to meet. We're going to fight. It's going to be this whole thing. So one night I'd had enough of all the talk and everything, and I had found out where he lived. And it was a very nice gated community apartments. So I go to the place, hop the fence, find his apartment, and I'm sitting there knocking on the door. I'm trying to get him to come outside. He wouldn't come outside. Now the girl that we're talking about, she had, it was believed that she had borderline. Okay. Anybody that's ever dealt with borderline knows it's never a dull moment.
Yeah.
And so in all honesty, I think she loved the fact that there were 2 guys getting ready to fight over her. So she was in there stoking the flame and egging it on a little bit. And so at the end of the day, he wouldn't come out. And so she ended up packing her stuff up and she's going to leave and come with me now. And so now I feel like I just won the grand prize. So I have this grand plan that we're going to move to Temple, Texas. And because there's a big VA there, that's where we're going to get sober. I have no idea what I was thinking or why that sounded like a good idea, but that's what the plan was. So we pack her in the car, go to Temple, Texas. We get to this, find the first little crackhead motel I can find. We start unpacking her stuff. As she's unpacking her stuff, out comes a laptop, out comes a cell phone, out comes an iPad, out comes a PlayStation. All this electronic stuff I know is not hers. Now, if you remember, I said before, one thing I never got down with in my entire addiction was stealing. So I never had any problem with this dude other than the girl, and now I got the girl back. So in my book, we're good. And so I hit him up. I'm like, hey, dude, I got your stuff. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not going to pawn it. You're more than welcome to come get it. So he thought I was setting him up. And so he decided he was going to send his mother to come pick these things up off me. Now, why you would send your mom to someone you think is setting you up, I don't know, but that's what he did. So late at night, this poor woman shows up to this dark, shady motel in the back of it, and I hand her the stuff. That's that. Very nice woman. And she goes on her way. So now fast forward 3 years later, I'm in Austin.
You didn't tell me. Okay.
I'm in treatment. I'm getting sober. I look in the mirror. I fucking hate who I see. I'd gained a bunch of weight. I felt like shit, looked like shit. So I'd found out about a little running group that met in downtown Austin. And so I got special permission from the treatment center. They were going to let me go to this run group, and I was just going to try to shave off a couple pounds. Show up to that run group, run my first 2 miles, nearly thought I was going to die, but I just remember I had this overwhelming sense of accomplishment when I got done and was like, I need to feel this again, so I kept going back. My 2 miles turned into 3 miles, 3 miles turned into 4 miles. It really started changing my experience in treatment. And then all of a sudden I hear about this woman named Penny that runs trail races and then ultra marathons. Now, I remember being in treatment originally 8 months before, listening to Joe Rogan and discovering who Cam Hanes was and hearing about this dude that runs these crazy races. I'm like, that shit's not possible. Well, now I have this woman here that does it. And I'm like, hey, like, will you train me up for a race? Please, I want to do this. And so she was the nicest woman ever. She's like, yeah, absolutely, I got you. And so she starts training me on how to run trails. And so I'll never forget, we were at Hill of Life. For those that don't know, Hill of Life is a very big rock hill here in South Boston. And she was teaching me how to run downhill full speed, leaning forward, loose rocks, roots, everything. And so as we're running, coming up back the hill, I'm sitting there, I'm telling her my story and, telling her I got kicked out of the military, ended up with this girl and blah, 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 blah. And at one point I say the girl's name as I'm telling the story. And my friend Penny's walking and she stops dead in her tracks. And she looks over at me and she goes, Shawn, do you know my son? And I was like, well, who's your son? Her son was my young homeboy from the treatment center. She was the mother that years before had come up and picked that stuff up off me. I've told that story at least 1 million times and I get goosebumps every time. If that ain't God, bro, I don't know what is. On what spectrum of the universe am I able to leave a city like Austin that's growing every day, that went through this enormous boom of tech people and Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and all these type of people coming to Austin? It's growing every day. What are the chances that I leave this city for 3 years and come back and get plugged in with the one person that would introduce me to an avenue to save my life? That is not God. I don't know what it is. I don't know. It's undeniable to me at this point. For a long, long time, I gave Penny all the credit and I said she saved my life, but I now know it was God that put her in my life.
Man, that's a lot. And about 20% of the story, you had told me that before. And I
thought I did.
Yeah. It's one of the more powerful stories you'll hear, I think.
Thank you.
Because we never realize how small this place we live on actually is until something like that happens and you're like, bro, what?
Right.
Like there's anybody, I believe, even with just a purely logical brain, knows that that's not coincidence. There's no way.
Right.
It's God, it's a higher power, it's whatever people want to believe in. But I think what's unique is you have to be in a certain place in your life to be able to see those things and understand them for what they actually are.
Right.
And a lot of times it's not until we're further in this recovery process that we can actually look back and be like, oh shit, like God was there then.
Yeah.
He was there all the way back when, looking out for X, Y, and Z. And for me, it's brought more questions than answers a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, damn, like there was times I should have been in trouble many a times. And not to say that I didn't get in trouble, but there were times that it should have been much worse.
Right.
And for whatever reason, bro, It didn't happen.
Right.
And so when I look back at those times, I'm like, man, was that intentional? Was that God? You know, is like, hey, well, if he takes that right now, like it might impact him later on, whatever those things are. But the further you get in your recovery journey, the more you can look back at those things and be like, no, that had to be God. My story, and I don't think I've ever shared it in depth, is very similar to that in a different way. I lived in Austin for 18, 19 months working on a project, was active in my addiction. I was in a toxic 2-year relationship, where I played my part too, right? Very similar. You know, I wasn't doing a whole lot to help the situation.
Right. Me neither.
So like we kind of fed off each other, super unhealthy. And we ended up splitting up. But when we were here, we lived at Bell South Lamar, which is an apartment complex on South Lamar. The company was paying for it. And we lived in this little unit on ground level. It was B129. And so I was very active in my addiction in that unit. Like, when I left there, it was honestly like a breath of fresh air. I was like, shit, like I can get away from that space. We split up. I left her here in Austin. She ended up dating a couple of different guys. One of them had like hurt her physically. Just some messed up shit. She's sober now, from my understanding, been sober for a couple of years, which
Good.
Kudos to her.
Yeah.
Love that. But I left and I went to Atlanta, and I was in Atlanta for a little over a year before I got sober. And right after I got sober, I'd started working a 12-step program. And for whatever reason, it was like, I knew of 12-step programs in Austin, and that's where the Zooms were at. So like I'd connected with those. So I'm living in Atlanta, working a 12-step out of Austin.
Oh, okay.
And so my sponsor lived in Austin. This is like peak COVID, bro. This is like July, August 2020. This shit was shut down.
I can't even fathom where this is going. I'm in.
Yeah, so I get a sponsor in Austin. I don't even tell him I'm in Atlanta, bro. Like, I'm like, you know what I mean? I'm just like,
Oh, really?
No, they didn't come out for a couple of weeks. But he gave me the steps, told me what to read, told me what to do, and I was just like blasting it, like as hard as I could. The same way I was approaching my nutrition, my exercise, everything. I was just like all in. Let's work through this.
Yeah.
Like I'm in it.
Yeah.
This is the time, or it's never going to happen. And so I leaned all the way in. I'm working through it. And for those of you that are familiar with the program, there comes a step that you need to sit down with your sponsor and go over your inventory. Well, that's quickly coming up. I mean, early in sobriety, bro, like close to 30 days, maybe a little less. I'm already like almost through my step.
Cranking it.
Just banging it. And we start having this conversation. He's like, well, we should sit down and get coffee, man, and like have a conversation, meet in person, like it's COVID. And I'm like, yeah, dude. I was like, one thing though, like
I'm in Atlanta, fam.
I'm in the A, the other A, you know what I mean? Different spot. And he's like, oh, like what? And I was like, well, I used to live there and I'm comfortable with that community. So when I got sober, like that's where I wanted to, whatever. And he's like, okay. I was like, will you still work with me, man? Like, I'll do whatever it takes. And he's like, yeah. He's like, but I do believe you should do this particular step in person. It's like, we can do it over Zoom, but like, it's different.
Not the same, yeah.
So I'm like, all right, well, mind you, I hadn't flown sober in 10 years. Don't like flying. I've gotten a lot better at it, but I was like, shit, I'm gonna have to get on an airplane in COVID, wear a mask, go through security. Like, it's going to be weird. Fly to Austin, sit down with this dude, do my step work. I don't have any money because I've blown it all, and fly back to Atlanta to go back to work. So either way, I do it. Like I get on the plane, I fly into Austin, I stay sober on the flight, which I was proud because all the bars were open during COVID in the airport, bro. Like they were all open. Everything else was shut down.
Really?
No headphones, no electronics, no candy, but they had liquor.
No shit.
So like, dude, I'm in there and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I'll just take one shot, no one will ever know, and that'll make the flight easy. I was like, nope, we're in it, dude. You're going to white knuckle this shit. So I remember being on the plane, just like tweaked. The plane landed in Austin. The doors opened up, bro. I'll never forget this. As soon as the doors opened up, it was like air, but it was like the warmth of it came into the plane. And as soon as it hit me, bro, I was like, this is home. I'm going to figure this out. This is home. It's like God was talking to me, right? I go over this step work with him. A lot of people talk about different experiences with this. My experience with it, like people will say like, oh, this weight was lifted and I felt magical and excited and happy and elated. That wasn't my experience. I dumped it out and I went back to where I was staying at and I slept for like 16 hours. Like my body just finally, it's like I let something go.
Yeah.
Woke up, had to get back on the plane, fly back to Atlanta, bro. I'm tweaking about that again. I get back to Atlanta sober and I decided on the plane ride back, like, I'm going to find an apartment finder, someone to help me find a place. Like if it's meant to be, it'll be so obvious that I'm supposed to quit my job and move to Austin. Like there'll be no question. I told this apartment finder woman, she's a great woman, but I was like, hey, do not call me Monday through Friday during work hours because like, I don't want to have to have this conversation in front of not just my employees, but my peers.
Yeah.
Them catch the drift. Oh, Tripp's going to leave. I don't want to deal with that. So I was like, don't call me during those hours. Well, I flew back in on a Sunday. The next day happened to be a Monday. This is probably 45 days into sobriety. And supposed to go to work Monday. We get rained out. My phone rings at like 10 a.m. She's calling during work hours. And I'm like, well, she didn't listen to shit.
Right.
Answer the phone. She's like, I know it's work hours, but like, I just had to call you. And I was like, okay, what's up? Like, we're off. She's like, I'm doing some apartment finding for different clients. And she's like, I found this place. She's like, I think you would really like it. Like, it sounds like it would fit your needs. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, where's it at? You know? And she's like, well, it's over here off South Lamar. It's called Bell South Lamar. Well, if you're familiar with Austin, there's a shitload of apartment complexes. She never knew I lived there. Right. So that was the first thing I was like, that's weird. And she's there with like the property management.
You weren't immediately like, I used to live there?
No,
Okay.
like it took a second.
Okay.
And she's like, I'm here with the property manager if you want to tell him like what you're looking for. So I like go through this list of what I'm looking for, knowing I don't have money for the shit. Like, this is what I'm seeking. And he's like, but he says like, hey, my name, and I can say it now. His name's Leo. And I was like, it clicked. I was like, Leo, Bell South Lamar. I was like, bro, it's Tripp. Like, I used to, we lived there. And he's like, oh yeah, man. Like, so we connect. And I was like, I'm looking for this type of unit. He's like, bro, we don't have anything like that coming on the books for like a couple years because it's COVID. Everyone's signing these long leases. They don't know
what it is. Yeah.
what's going to happen. And so I was just like a smart ass. And I was like, bro, honestly, like if you get another unit like B129, just let me know. And I was going to hang up the phone. And he's like, actually, that one just became available yesterday. There's no security deposit, no first month's rent. All you got to do is fill out the application.
Is this your old apartment?
The exact apartment.
Get the fuck out of here.
He sends me the application. I fill it out. They approve it. I walked into work the next day and quit.
No shit.
That was God.
Yeah.
And so I got to go back to the place where I was arguably at my deepest and face it sober in my new life. Right. And I lived there. I lived in that apartment for about 6 months.
I thought you were going to tell me your ex-girl was the apartment finder.
No,
I thought you were going to go.
No. I think she's still around Austin, somewhere around here, but she's like happily in a relationship, like sober.
Good shit.
I couldn't be more pumped.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's about people being healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, man, that was like the first big God thing for me. The other thing is like numerology. Like people will be like, oh, that's not God. I'm like, for me, that kind of is. That's how I communicate. On that flight.
Who is anybody else to say that's not God?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, fuck.
I'm going to do me.
Yeah. I don't know. I always come back to the thing like, I don't think our simple minds can even comprehend what God is or is not or anything like that. So for somebody to say that sounds ridiculous to me, but anyways, go ahead.
No, you're right. And so that flight though, from Austin back to Atlanta, and there's a flight from Austin to Atlanta. It's Delta Flight 1335. My college number was 35. I've always hated the number 13. I'm like, oh, bad. But it was like Friday the 13th. I'm on flight 1335.
Did you realize you were on my show on Friday the 13th?
Yeah, that was last. Yeah. That was wild.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in this line to board the plane, and this guy in front of me, he's like, dude, he's like, Friday the 13th, our flight has a 13 in it. Like, this is doomed. Like, this is not going to end well.
That's what he's saying is you guys are getting on the plane and you're scared of flying.
And I'm tweaked already. And I'm like, dude. And so I said a prayer. I was like, God, let's flip this. You show me 13s when things are good, and I'll know this is good. And I flipped it on its head. And bro, I started seeing 13s literally everywhere.
Okay.
Now when I fly Austin to Atlanta, I'm like, yeah, 1335, that's my flight. So it's created this other thing for me where like, that's how I know God's around. And that might not work for everyone, but I don't really give a shit. Like, it works for me. And to your point, whatever works, as long as you're not harming somebody and it's making you a better person, who are you to judge anyone for how they get down?
Yeah.
That's why it leads into the next part of this faith conversation. We have a couple minutes here. Church. Have you found a church that you love and you can stay consistent with, or has it been tough? Have you had to try different places?
No. So this is a layered thing. I'll try to be quick, but originally I'd found a church that was, it was right by my house, and there was an anchor pulling me for whatever reason at this certain time in my life not long ago to go back to church. It was just calling me, and so I remember there was a church by my house, and the name of it's called Radical Church. And so I would just see that sign and be like, oh, those crazy people in there. They probably got snakes and speaking in tongues and all that stuff. I never paid it no mind. And so I was feeling this inner pull to go back to church. There's another buddy of mine that lives close by, and I was talking with him, and I bounced the idea off him. And he's like, dude, I've been thinking the same thing. I just have my daughter. I want her to grow up in the church. Let's go. I know a good place. And I'm like, cool. Of course, he brings me to Radical Church. And so I walk in there, dude, nicest group of people ever. Amazing people. Amazing young, energetic pastor. And I remember sitting there in church, and, it's one of those things where everything the preacher's saying that day feels like it's aimed directly at me, And so I just remember sitting in there, and I'm like, well, this is just like a meeting. Are you just going to come to a meeting, or are you going to take part in the meeting? And so after the sermon, I went up, introduced myself to the pastor, and he, great guy. We ended up saying we were going to meet for coffee or lunch or whatever it is the following week. Now, mind you, this is the week before Easter. And so I go to meet him. He knows nothing about me. He doesn't know about the documentary, running, anything. We sit down and just kind of a little bit of small talk, nothing big. And he kind of just stops. And he's like, Shawn, I got to tell you something. He goes, for the past months, every sermon I delivered has been leading us up to this coming Sunday for Easter. He goes, for whatever reason, yesterday, God gave me a sign that I wasn't going to be the one to deliver the sermon on Easter Sunday, and I didn't know what he was talking about. He goes, would you be willing to come speak at the church? And I was just like, my jaw hit the floor. My mother was a single mother when I was growing up when I was 2, so she put me in Catholic school for a little while, and so I kind of grew up around the church. I know how big Easter Sunday is. And so the fact that this man was asking me to come share the stage with him over somebody he just met one time blew me away, and lets me know I was in the right place. So I went up and I spoke at all four services that day for Easter Sunday, and religiously going to church and everything. And then, in all honesty, man, and I think it's a lot more where I was at in life, not where they are, but they're a growing church. They're getting bigger. And so some of the themes of the sermons, it's kind of started being geared around giving and money and all that stuff. And so I think just at the point where I was at in my life, that took me out of the message, if that makes sense. And so I stopped going to church. Still praying every day, still keeping a close relationship with God. But it's funny, I listen to this pray app every morning on my way to the gym, and that's kind of my quiet prayer time on the way. So I listen to the prayer app, and one of the things they started to, mind you, in this time, there were a couple weeks that got really, really dark. Was definitely going through some depression, suicidal thoughts. The first time I've ever faced something like that in the 7 years that I've been sober. And so it was a lot. So the one morning I'm listening to my prayer app, and it was a tone of story. It was telling a story of a guy who was praying to God he's praying for happiness because he was going through something. And God spoke to him and said, I gave you life. Happiness is on you. And I was like, ooh, that's good. And then the guy was sitting there praying because he was suffering. He was praying for God to take his suffering away. And God told him, no, I allow you to suffer because it brings you closer to me. And that hit me right in the heart. I was like, oh, man. So like you're saying, that was God talking to me, letting me know, hey, shit was bad. I called you to come to me and you came. And then things started going better and you left again. Now look where you're at. You know what I mean? Not saying that God's a punishing God, but so a very long answer to your question. since then I've met with my preacher, and we sat there and talked. We went to the gym together one time. Not actively going to church, still have a very close relationship with God, but working my way back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I've had my own battles with locations, right? But I would say, for me, my relationship with God is better when I'm attempting to go to church.
Mm-hmm.
I can do the praying, I can do the morning devotionals, but it does hit something different for me when I go. I struggle with the money thing too, just to keep it all the way real. Like, there was a scenario where I was in a service, I couldn't be there in person that day, so I'd done it virtual. And like in the live, somebody was like, "I'm suicidal. I need help. Somebody please help me." Like, in the chat.
Oh, wow.
And so I clicked on their name and DM'd them. I was like, "Hit me right now. Here's my number." And they hit me. And they start telling me this story. And part of me, like, I take my time when I'm like going to believe people most of the time. But when it comes to shit like that, it's like, you have to believe that first.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because if you've really been there, like, you might not have time to judge it. You might just be real and then it's over.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's telling me a story. He's on a mission trip in Africa. His mission is to essentially build churches and homes for these children, and they've run out of funding, right? And he's like, "I feel like I've failed. These kids are sick. They have nowhere to worship. They have nowhere to sleep." He's like, "So I just want to like be gone, man. Like, I'm done with this." He's like, "I've been tuning into this church." And I'm like, "Bro, what do you need?" And he shoots me this link. He's like, "This is our program. These are the kids. Like, I'll send you as many pictures of whatever you request, like anything, but like, we need funds." So I shot him some money, right? And I promised him that I'm going to bring it to my church and see if like anybody else in the church wants to contribute. Website was legit, dude. Like, they had not just a website, but a Facebook and Instagram, testimonials. Like, it was
all bullshit,
bro. So I go to my pastor, right? This is before it all looked very real at this point. And I'm like, "Hey man, this is what happened during the live stream today. I wanted to let you know, I'd love to bring this opportunity to the church." Because they're always asking for money, right? And his instant answer, like off the top, without further discussion, is, "We don't donate to strangers." And bro, that, regardless, scam or not, like, and I get his principle on that, but bro, that goes against everything that I'm about.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit. Like, if someone comes to me and they need help and I can give it, I'm going to give it. And honestly, like, this is probably not the greatest thing. It might be a flaw, but like, even if it impacts me negatively, so many people did that for me, I'm going to give.
Yeah.
The person that told me we don't give to strangers, right, this pastor, comes from a background very similar to ours.
Mm.
I'm sitting here thinking, like, what? Like, how?
Yeah.
Like, how can you even think that way?
Right.
That drove me away too. Right? That was one of the things. There was other circumstances around picking and choosing which sins were worse or better. That never sat right with me.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, that's judgment. I'm not God, bro. God says X, Y, and Z, right? Who am I to be like, Y is worse than Z, bro? We need to really hammer that. And the people that are doing X, like, that's cool. Like, everyone's doing that. That never sat well with me.
Right.
So I struggle with locations. I struggle with traditionality. I struggle with the message a lot of times. But where I'm getting to is like, if I'm really there to worship and celebrate my relationship with God, none of that shit really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's me setting my ego down and not needing to be right or correct, but knowing that I'm leaning into that to connect with God. But I'm still struggling with that. I finally found a church, bro.
Good.
Down in New Braunfels. And I love it. They rotate who gives the sermons. There's men, there's women. This lady gave a sermon Sunday that was like off the chain. It's the second time I've heard her give one. and it was on the conversation between joy and happiness. It's funny you just brought up happiness and how that was in your prayer app. But she was talking about how happiness is a worldly feature. Joy comes from the Creator. Don't pursue happiness, pursue joy. Because worldly things can take away happiness. They can't take away joy.
Yeah.
That's up to the Creator.
Yeah.
So it was an awesome conversation and sermon around that. And so I feel like I'm learning a lot there. There doesn't seem to be a lot of judgment there. Like it seems like people of all walks show up. There's no, there's no casting out or any of that happening. It's literally teaching the Bible, but allowing space within that for people to decide for themselves if they're living right or not.
Yeah.
Versus someone saying like, you're wrong, you suck, you failed. That doesn't work. So my relationship with God sounds like we have, it's not identical. No relationship with God is, but it sounds like we have a very similar outlook on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Given the history.
Yeah, our parallels are pretty parallel, dog.
I have a personal question I want to ask you before we tap out.
Please.
I don't think I've ever asked you this. And if it's too personal, just meh. I know you're married, happily married. You've talked to me multiple occasions about your wife and how special that is and all that kind of thing. Do you want kids?
No.
No,
I never had that. My wife had thyroid cancer.
Okay.
She had her thyroid removed, so she's on medication that if she didn't have, couldn't live and all that. If she were to get pregnant, she would be high risk. I've always been kind of, I don't know, man. I never had that inner pull that like I need to have a kid. I was always supportive. If it happened, it happened. But I think when I finally had gotten sober, I had gotten to the point where it's like if I was meant to have kids, I would have had them. And then I started doing what I do, kind of traveling, speaking, doing that stuff. And I don't know, man, like I just feel that that's what I'm meant to do. I feel like if I was to stop doing that, to be like, because I knew I couldn't do it at the level I do if I went and had a kid.
Right.
Travel's going to be tough, all these different things are where I'm definitely trying to go and do. And so I don't think her nor I never really had that inner pull. We were both always of the mindset of like, hey, if it happens, we're good. And then I think after we were a little bit into our relationship, we just kind of had the conversation where we're like, you good? You good? Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. Question I wanted to end it on. We're wrapping up 2024.
Yeah.
I believe in setting goals.
Okay.
I'm a goal setter.
All right.
I want to revisit this at some point in 2025.
Okay.
Give me a stretch goal for 2025 for Shawn Livingston.
Oh, stretch goal. Another 100-miler.
Okay. We're going to revisit that.
I'm just getting my feet back in this running world. And I've said it on my show, but I'll say it on yours. You were the one that inspired me to get back into running. I haven't been running for years. As soon as I got around you and saw that fire lighting up under you, I was like, well, I want that back. So you got me out there, and dude, much to your credit, I remember talking to you and having the conversation. As I was originally getting back into running, I was like, my goal is to be able to run 10 miles by the end of this month comfortably. And by the second weekend running with you, I was already back at it. So
yeah,
mileage came back. Speed didn't really come back, but yeah, different trying to run now with 50 extra pounds on you.
For sure. I look forward to that because it's going to happen. I think it's already written, but I look forward to being there. I know you're going to be with me in February.
Yeah.
And I think that those types of experiences and opportunities, like if you want to get close with someone, go be with them when they break themselves off during an ultra.
Yeah.
That'll create a level of depth to your friendship, relationship, whatever, that you're not going to get in your typical.
You're bonded, dude.
Yeah. For life.
Bonded.
So I'm excited for that. But brother, thank you for coming back on. I've enjoyed this.
Always.
The conversations, I think, with us, they're never ending.
Mm-hmm.
Like we could probably continue to do this, and I'm sure we will.
Easily.
But I'm excited for both of us. And actually, we got a minute. I'm going to hit on this. Our podcasts are similar.
Very.
And I think that this is something important that both of us acknowledge. A lot of people in the podcast space or any space really are like, they have envy around someone else's success and what they're doing. I'm grateful since we've met in person, that's never existed.
Yeah.
If you go to our post, it's literally celebratory on both sides. It's like, hell yeah, dude, this is badass. I love this.
Right.
Lean in. That's how you know you're dealing with the right people. because it's not about personal success. If his show and what he's doing helps a certain group of people or more people, I'm all for it, bro. That's what it should be.
Yeah.
It's about helping people
Exactly.
at the end of the day. And so I just want to commend you for having like that level of humbleness. Like you beat me into the game, right? And you could have easily been like, nah, bro, like I'm not going to contribute to what you got going. It was never that, bro. It was instantaneous. Like, I got you. What do you want to do? How do you want, what do you need from me? And so I just have ultimate gratitude for you for that, bro.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Bro, I did fall into that very first, you know what I mean? I started, you and I spoke, where I started seeing every other podcast and all that is like competition and shit like that. But it's, why the fuck do I want to do this by myself?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be the only podcast. Like, I don't know, if you look at comedians, look at Rogan and that whole stratosphere of people, like those dudes all do each other's podcasts and they all rise.
Yeah.
If you and I were to stand in front of 100 people, there's going to be a portion of that people that identify with what I'm saying. There's going to be a portion that identify with you saying. We could be saying the exact same thing. It could just be how you look or I look or our voice or whatever. There's no shortage of people out here that need fucking help. And there's people that are able to reach a large demographic of people. I'm not. And so I'm all for it. And like, I just want to be, I just want to surround myself with the best people possible. And bro, this past year in my life has been a moment where I've started to, instead of looking at people like, what do I receive from these people? I start looking at like, what do I add to this equation? For whatever reason, I think social media, a good friend of mine, Claire Bays, taught me this. When I originally got in contact with her and I became friends, she has a very large social media following. And I'm like, oh my God, like, that's awesome. You're doing great. And she was like, well, don't fall into the mistake of mistaking success and perceived success. Social media is a lot of perceived success. And so a lot of people see the posts or the studio or, the team of people that I work with and all that. And they see success. Bro, I ain't made no money from this. There ain't nothing monetized or anything like that. The goal is to help people. I don't give a fuck about anything else. And so when people talk to me, you or anybody else that are doing a podcast or doing anything like that, if I see it's some good, genuine people that are out there to really fucking help people and they're not out there for just a large social media following, I will go to the ends of the earth to help anybody. I'm not worried about people not watching my show or anything like that. I hope people tune in to everybody else's shit, but like anything else in life, bro, you do this for a little bit and you start going around on social media and you start seeing a lot of these people that have bought their followers, they bought their subscribers, you see that shit and it's like, bro, like, we're doing this to help people. Why do you give a fuck how many followers you got or anything else? Like, that's not why we're in this. And if you're in it for that, you're in it for the wrong reasons.
Bro, to wrap it on that, and I've shared a little bit with you, there's been someone new that's come into my life and she's just given me a lot of truth. And it's a lot of truth that I need.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things she told me, I was bitching and moaning one day about followers. I'm like, like this is bullshit. Like this guy has this, she's like, look, stop focusing on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not why you're here. That's not why you started this. And that's damn sure not why you're going to finish this. Go back to your purpose. And so I sat it down literally 24 hours, leaned back into my purpose, went and gave a speech and picked up like 400 followers. Right. Of the people that you would want to follow. Right. I went back to her and I'm like, and she's like, I told you. She's like, all right, put it back down though.
Right.
Back to it. Back to the kitchen. You know what I mean? Keep cooking.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so important that you don't get caught up in that metric. The right people, like God didn't bring us this far to just bring us this far.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that.
Right.
I think there's more people to help, which means there's more purpose for me and same to you. So I'm grateful for you, bro. I'm glad we're on this journey together.
Oh, yeah.
I look forward to seeing where it takes us. I think it's probably gonna be pretty epic.
Yeah.
But I love you, man. And thank you for coming back.
Love you too, brother. Honor and anytime.
100%. All right. That's going to wrap it for today's episode of the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. Love you guys. See you next time.
Ain't dead yet?
Ain't dead yet.